All good, says Chloe. Perfect. Okay, so we need to start recording. Lovely. Just bear with me a second, everybody. I do apologise. Oh, it's okay. The session is being recorded. Okay, lovely. So I think we're up and running. Good, wonderful. So, lovely, perfect. So a very good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to the second in our sessions talking about TEFL teaching. For those of you who joined me on Monday, a very warm welcome back again. Thank you for coming back. For those of you who are new, also the same, a very, very good morning. And I hope you're all well, and it's lovely to have you on the call today. So my name's Anna. I'm one of the UK-TEFL trainers. You'll often see me sort of in and around normally the south of the UK, but I do venture further north occasionally. I've been teaching and training for sort of over 20 years now, so and I love helping people sort of start their careers. So please, as I said, if you've got any questions, there is space at the end of the session to ask some questions. But if you want to ask any questions as we're going through, I'll do my best to keep an eye on the questions bar and try and answer them as we go along. Okay, so that's great. So let's get started. So I wanted to share with you this morning some of the questions that I frequently get asked. Okay, and the purpose of doing this is, as we go through the session today, I want to see if some of those questions get answered for you. And we'll have a section at the end where we can just reflect and see if I have answered those questions for you or whether you'd like a little bit more information. So without further ado, these are the questions. So I always get asked in the live sessions, do I need to know the language of the country I'm teaching in? Okay. Excellent question, and hopefully one that we can answer during the session today. What happens if they're beginners or very low levels? Absolutely, such a good question, and again, something that hopefully today we can answer. How do I make myself understood? Yes, particularly if the students in front of you are very low levels, how do you make yourself understood? Will I have a translator? I often get asked this. So I'm in a school overseas. Will there be somebody to help me? Will I have somebody who can translate? And the other one I often get asked is, how do I plan a good lesson? What does that look like? So those are some of the things that we're going to be doing today. So the outcomes for today's session, very simple. How to teach even beginner levels. So looking at those very low levels, and we're going right back to basics to beginners. We're going to have a quick look at PPP lesson planning. For those of you who are going through the online course, I suspect you've come across this already. If you haven't yet got that far, don't worry. This will give you a bit of an introduction. For those of you who have done some reading about it, hopefully this will give you a chance to sort of see it in action. And as always, we want to clarify any questions. So those are my outcomes for today. So let's get started. Now, what I would like you to do, and the problem is I can't see if you're doing this, so I'm going to just have to hope that you are all following my instructions. I would like you all to close your eyes. Okay, so wherever you are at home, put yourself into or in the office, put yourself into a comfortable spot and close your eyes. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything horrible to you. Right, everybody got their eyes closed? Good. So I want you to imagine, and this is going to take a bit of imagination, particularly in the current crisis. I would like you to imagine that instead of being sat at home or sat in the office, we've actually all met together at Heathrow Airport. And I want you to imagine that we are all getting on a plane and we all settle into our seats and we're ready to depart. And the pilot taxis us to the end of the runway and we turn onto the runway and we start to build up speed. We go faster and faster and faster until eventually we take off. And the pilot takes us eastwards. We turn east. And we fly and we fly and we fly and we eat the food on the little trays that they give us and we watch a few films. Some of us try and have a little sleep. And after about 12 hours, we start to descend, we start to come into land. And we land and we get off the plane and oh my goodness, it is hot. It is warm and sweaty, but that's okay, because the bus that's come to meet us is air conditioned. So we pop ourselves into the bus and we head off downtown. And we get out of the bus and we go upstairs and we come into our new classroom where we sit down and we open our eyes. Selamat datang. Selamat datang. Merah. 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 Putih. 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 Biru. 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 Hitam. 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 Cunning. 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 Merah jambu. Merah jambu. Merah jambu. Merah. Putih. Biru. Hitam. Cunning. Merah jambu. Apakah itu cunning? Merah. Apakah itu merah? Biru. Apakah itu hitam? Merah jambu. Apakah itu cunning? Putih. Apakah itu biru? Hitam. Hitam. Putih. Merah jambu. Biru. Merah. 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 Putih. Putih. Hitam. Hitam. Biru. biru. Cunning, cunning. Merah jambu, merah jambu. Okay, come back to me. Now then, as you can see, we've just learned 6 colours. And that is the part that we would call the presentation. So the presentation of our target language. And you all did very well, by the way. Your pronunciation was excellent. Once we've actually done the presentation of the target language, obviously we need to move into practice and production. And you saw there that we were just starting to do a little bit of practice. So me holding up a little bit of clothing and giving you the wrong colour is me checking your understanding, okay? So you're starting to practice. What I often do then is I move into, and I've got a photo there for you. Normally I would do this live when we do our sessions. We move into the practice and production stage, and you can see here that we've got something called a board slap. This is one of my favourite activities. And oh, by the way, Andra is asking what language was it. If anybody knows, pop it into the questions box and do it to everybody. Send it to everybody. If we don't get the right answer, I'll oh, I do apologise. There we go. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I've just realised I'd had it on pause. There we are. Let me just go back. So sorry. We've got merah. We've got putih. We've got hitam, biru, kuning, merah jambu. Thank you, Beth, for pointing that out. It wasn't Vietnamese? No, Safia. You're in the right part of the world, though. Keep going. So once we've done our presentation of our target language, we need to move on to the practice and production stage. So, as I was just saying, one of the things that I often do is something called a board slap. So I go back and I use my resources and I put them on the board, and you can see there that we've got 2 lines. And the idea is that the people at the front, I shout one of the colours, and they're all up on the board over here, and they have to run and they have to hit the colour that I shout. So if I shout merah jambu, they have to run and touch merah jambu, and whoever gets there first gets a point for their team. Once we've done that, I am very mean and I just point to the colour, and the person at the front of the line has to shout what it is. So I move from passive to active, receptive to productive. So I'm checking your understanding first before I ask you to produce the language. And by making it a competition, it makes it really, really good fun. The energy levels go up in the classroom, and the students don't even realise they're being tested. So it's a really fun way of doing it. I've had some other suggestions here. Somebody said Thai, Andrew says Thai. Tagalog, says Georgina. You're in the right part of the world, but not the right language yet. Keep going. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions for you. So when we do our target language presentation, so that's where I introduce the target language. So my target language today are 6 colours. Okay, so very, very beginner level class. I'm teaching you 6 colours. Some questions for you. So first of all, you'll notice that the way that we teach vocabulary is we look at meaning first, pronunciation second, and form third. So you will see quite often people talking about MPF, meaning, pronunciation and form. That is the order that we teach new vocabulary in, okay? And there's a reason for that. Cambodian says Maisie, Cambodian says Simona. Nope, again, you're still in the right part of the world. I'll let you into a secret, people. There is no way that I can deal with the scripts of Thai or Cambodian or Vietnamese. They're far too complex for me. It's a much, much simpler language. Oh, well done, Georgina, you get the points. It's Malay, yes, it's Bahasa. So it's the language that they speak in one of the languages they speak in Malaysia, one of the languages that they speak in Indonesia, and it's one of the 4 official languages of Singapore. And it uses a Roman script, unlike things like Mandarin, Thai, which use a completely different script, and there's no way that I could deal with any of them. So when we do our vocabulary, we teach, as I said, we teach meaning, pronunciation, and form. Now then, why do I teach form last? Can you put your answers into the question section? Why do I teach the form? So the form, just to remind everybody, is that bit there, the written, if you like, the written form. So in this particular case, it's spelling, but with grammar, it might be, you know, looking at things like contractions. So why do I focus on form at the end and not at the beginning? Yeah, in a way, it is how you learn your own language, isn't it, Georgina? So if you think about when you were little, you learn to listen first before you speak, then you learn to read before you write. Absolutely. So it's it is harder. Yeah, yes, to learn. So Andrew says because the first approach is speaking. I do apologise, I can't read that. Is it? I do apologise, I can't see your name, sweetheart. To allow them to learn the language conversationally, people learn by repeating. Yes, because you need to know, Beth says, because you need to know what it means before you can spell it. Yes, Simona, to avoid confusion with the way you would pronounce it in your own language. Safia says, because if you can speak the language, you can think. Yes, you want to make the connection in the brain in the easiest way before the nitty gritty, says Monty. Lovely, all lovely answers. There's a very simple reason for it. Let me share with you. Has anybody come across this before? How would you pronounce it? So some of you have a little think. How would you pronounce that? Can I just say goatee, says Beth. Nice. I particularly like the goat with the hyphen E. Makes it look like a sort of I don't know, goat on internet or something, like an e-goat. I love it. Okay. Goat, says Georgina. Gottee, says Monty. Gitty, says Andra. Oh, lovely. You're all wrong. Let me show you. Okay. So this is the problem with the English language. I say problem. I'll just share with you in a moment what I mean. So if I give you those words, how do you pronounce G-H-O-T-I? Yes, Georgina, fish, well done. So we've got the enough, the GH is a f sound. The O is a wi, women. And motion is a sh sound. And the reason that, well done, Simona, yes, fish. So one of the reasons that we teach the written form last is because often in English, not always, but often, there is no relationship between the written form and how you pronounce it. So if you look at languages like Spanish, Spanish is 100% phonics. So when you learn the rules for pronunciation, they don't change. Happy days. If you look at Bahasa, it's 100% phonic language. Once you've learned the rules, they don't change. Okay. English, because it's an amalgamation of so many different languages, we don't have very many rules. And in fact, a lot of the rules that we have are not really rules, they're generalizations. So we always teach the form last because it just confuses our students otherwise, particularly when they're low levels. So if you think of the letters O-U-G-H, you've got brought, bow, cough, enough. All of the ways we pronounce O-U-G-H are different, and there's no real rule to it. Now, I've said that this is a terrible thing. It's not really terrible at all. This is one of the reasons that that we all have work, because the English language is incredibly confusing. So I think behind it all, there was a bunch of English teachers who just thought, let's make life really complicated for our students, and that will always keep us in work. So one of the big things that you as fluent English speakers give to your classes is the fact that you can pronounce correctly. Okay, and this is really your big USP, your unique selling point. And we want to make sure that meaning and pronunciation are clear first. So you will see that I use very, very simple visuals. Okay, there is no confusion. If I had used, I do apologise, this is my sports top, it's the only pink thing I have in the house. But if I'd used that as my pink object, it might be that your students are not sure whether you're teaching the colour or whether you're teaching the item of clothing. So just make sure that your visuals are really, really simple. Okay, so there's no confusion there, and you'll see that I check the meaning and I check your pronunciation, and we do that by drilling. So you'll have seen that I did sort of like Mera Jambu, okay, and you get them to repeat back, and I'll check individually, I'll check in groups. And I use my visuals all the way through the lesson, so I keep coming back to them. So students are familiar with them, and I use them in the presentation stage, the practice stage, and the production stage, just so that students are really, really clear. You'd be amazed. I bet you by tomorrow you can still remember all 6 words. Okay. So I also wanted to share with you some activities to practice and produce the target language. And you'll see that a lot of these activities, I always say to students, the clue is to think back to really bad family parties and quiz shows on TV. That's how I get most of my ideas. So you've got things like charades and Pictionary. You know, when you're sort of children and your parents decide to play charades at Christmas, and you're like, oh God. In the classroom, it works brilliantly. So I've got some sort of ideas there for activities. So we've got things like board slap. So that's what I normally do for the practice and production with my colours in Bahasa. And that's really simple. You just line the students up in 2 lines, and they run and they just hit the board. Works with all ages, right through to adults. The only thing I would say is that when you're teaching young learners, probably under about the age of 7, it gets a little bit sometimes a bit violent, so you might just want to check the age that you're teaching. Charades, absolutely great fun. I did a session for UK-TEFL at one of the schools a few months ago, and the students had been teaching emotions and animals, and the group produced a list of animals and then a list of emotions, and we had them in 2 piles on the desk, and somebody had to come up and turn over an animal and an emotion and do the charade. Well, we had happy cat, fine. We had sad dog, not too bad. We got to depressed slug, and even I was on the floor laughing my head off. So great. Safia's asked a good question. How do you stop the activity seeming patronising with adults? You'd be amazed, Safia, because they're using a language that they're not perhaps very comfortable in. by doing a lot of these activities that they feel quite sort of comfortable with, you take away the patronising bit. So, I mean, if I was to do board slap in English with you using this, you would probably feel a little bit patronised because it's not age and level appropriate. So things like I've done, where are we? Backs to the board. Over here, backs to the board, I've done with professionals when I've been doing communication skills workshops, and they love it. Generally what happens is that the energy level in the class goes up, and they infect each other, and they absolutely love it. But again, it's a question of just getting to know your class. If you've got a class of very, very quiet sort of people, then maybe go more towards the sort of the bingo and the dominoes and what have you. Things like TPR activities, I'm not sure if you've come across that in your online course yet. TPR just means total physical response. And it's things like, you'll see there, I've got Anna says, I don't need Simon. Anna says it's my classroom, my rules. Head, shoulders, knees and toes is a good TPR. My mother is 73 and she does TPR in her Spanish classes. So they learn to drive a car. So they learn the parts of the car by getting into the car, putting the key in the ignition, changing the gears. They do all of that in Spanish and she loves it. And as I said, she's 73 and a mathematician. So if she can do TPR, quite frankly, anybody can. Just a minute, things like that is where you have to speak for a minute without repeating anything. Really good fun, students love it, call my bluff. Countdown, any sort of word puzzles, so crosswords. Dominoes, again, great, because you can use a picture and the word and match them. Or you can actually do things like the word and the phonetic the phonetics of it and match those. There are lots of different ways of doing dominoes, and you'll see here I've got an example of Pelmanism in the middle. So if you're not sure what Pelmanism is, it's just the memory game. So you turn them all over and you turn one and another, and if they match you get to keep them. If they don't match, you turn them back over, the next person has a go. It's really, really great fun and students love it. So generally speaking, if you put a little bit of competition in your classes and you sort of put people into teams, it doesn't matter what age they are, they react really well to it. I have never had a class that doesn't work well with this. You'd also find that these are great activities to use at the beginning of the class as an energizer. So backs to the board I often use in the morning as a way of reviewing concepts or vocabulary from previous lessons. I do a lot of sort of songs in my classes, but I can't sing, but that doesn't matter, my students don't mind. And we do a lot of sort of TPR and things like that. So, you know, I think, Safia, generally you don't have a problem, but just get to know your class, get to know, and don't start off with things like that, maybe just to build up to them. So dealing with low levels, I suppose some advice from having done it for many years, learn from my mistakes. So use visuals and realia. So if you want to teach your students what a mug is, show them a mug. It's really simple. That's realia. If you want to show them mobile phone, show them a mobile phone. That's the use of realia, and make sure your visuals are really clear and not confusing. And I say that particularly with animals. Use non-verbal communication. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, really simple. You don't need a lot of language. Use your strong students to model activities. You'll very quickly work out who the strong students are in your class. Yeah, absolutely, Simon. I use a lot of hand gestures. When I moved to Spain at the beginning of my career, I felt like I'd found my tribe. I'm a very, I use my whole body to communicate, and it was a great country to perfect that in. So I can actually teach without using any language at all. I use, if I find that my students are very, very noisy, I go into silent and I just use my body, and they very quickly learn. So it's a really, really good thing to do. Also, if you feel like you've been talking a lot, if you felt like you've heard your own voice for a bit, just go back to non-verbal communication. Gives you a rest. You shouldn't be exhausted at the end of your lessons. Other things to think about, use local staff, your director of studies. You'll remember I introduced you to the idea of the director of studies, the parents' evenings. So when you have parents' evenings, if you've got parents coming along who are not going to be able to speak English, don't worry, the school are used to it. They really know about it. Local staff will be present to translate, or the director of studies will, or they'll pair you together with a teacher who is able to speak the local language, so don't panic. Again, the same for if you're doing some counselling about sort of students' progress, or if there's something really important that you want your class to be very, very clear about, it might be that you ask the director of studies or a local staff member to just come in and translate as you give the message. So don't worry, you're not alone. Andrew uses, she says, I'm Italian, so I use gestures and non-verbal language. Absolutely. But you do have to be careful. Different gestures mean different things in different countries. Just a word of warning. And don't forget, we talked on Monday about a sense of humour being really important as a teacher. Just remember that, because you will end up with some miscommunication. It's part and parcel of travelling. So I wanted to just go back to you and ask whether you think, so do I need to know the language of the country I'm teaching in? Bearing in mind that I've taught all over the world, and as I've already confessed to you, my knowledge of Vietnamese and Chinese and what have you is next to nothing. No, is the answer. If you're going to live there for a long time and you feel like you really want to integrate, then yes, go for it, learn the language of the country, but more for integration outside the class, not for the classroom. Often in a lot of schools, they do offer local language classes. So, you know, make the most of it, take the opportunity. But you don't need it for your classroom at all. Okay, what happens if they're beginners, very low levels? Don't expect to go very quickly. We've just learned 6 colours. That might be all you do for the lesson, but when you're at lower levels, you're not expected to get through very much with them. So we're going slowly, we're doing lots of repetition, we're using non-verbal communication carefully. You know, and we're making sure that all of the activities give them lots of chances to practice and to produce the language. I should just say as well, Andra, you're Italian, that's great. All of these concepts translate into other language. So if you want to teach Italian as a foreign language, it's exactly the same. You just change the language of instruction. That's it. So all of the concepts are the same. How do I make myself understood? Don't just grade your language. So if you've got a class of beginners, then use your body and just make it very obvious. Think Mr. Bean. That's why Mr. Bean is so popular all over the world. People don't need to understand any words. It's visual humour. That's all it is. If you think about Rowan Atkinson's a lovely example, actually, because with Mr. Bean, it's very simple. It's all visual humour. He made himself a millionaire. If you look back to something like Blackadder, Blackadder is all verbal humour. It's very sort of clever, but it didn't make him a millionaire because it doesn't translate around the world. I'm not quite sure what I'm saying there. I think I'm saying that if you want to be a millionaire, do visual humour. But anyway, you can make yourself really well understood without using any words at all. Will I have a translator for certain things? Quite possibly, yes. And how do I plan a good lesson? Well, we're going to have a little look at that again next week, because next time on Monday we're going to have a look at teaching grammar, and we're going to have a look at the PPP in action for grammar teaching. However, I just wanted to throw the floor open to you. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask that they don't think I've answered, or they're just curious about, or they want a bit more information. I have a curiosity, says Andre. Yes, what's your curiosity? Okay, so you live in the UK at the moment. If you're 18 years teaching older students, is it harder to get their respect, says Safia? That's such a good question, darling. No, as long as you go in, and I mentioned the other day about being open, approachable, and staying curious. And one of the key things is to do that. So to not go in as a sort of like, you know, here I am, I'm the expert, but to go in as being open, friendly, curious. And also remember what your USP is, your unique selling points. And my unique selling point is that I can speak English and I'm here to help. And I think if you go in with that attitude, I've never had a problem. Georgina says, do you find it hard to integrate into life outside of the classroom, like the social aspect? I haven't had a problem, Georgina. Probably noticed that I'm happy to talk to anybody. But generally, I find people are really interested in you, and what you might find is that people, I get this sometimes if I'm overseas visiting somewhere, if I don't look, if I stand out, as I'm going down the street, I get things like, hello, are you the English teacher? I was in a bar one morning in Italy quietly having breakfast. I was having a coffee, and the bar owner suddenly said to me, oh, are you the examiner? Good morning. You know, so you find that people will come and talk to you all the time. Oh, if I move abroad as the TEFL teacher, do I need to do tax return and pay tax in the UK? Andra, I'm not a tax expert. It depends how many days you're living overseas, my darling. If you've moved overseas, then no, the UK has got really good dual tax agreements with most countries, and you don't have to pay double tax. So it's not like the US. The US are terrible. How do you deal with big differences in students' abilities in terms of planning, says Anise. Good question. You do lots of what we call differentiation. So you might be with crosswords and things. I often prepare 3. So I've got hard, very hard, extreme, and I get students to choose which one they want to do. If I know that students are really struggling, some students are really struggling, I just ask them to do questions 1 to 3, and everybody else has to get to 10. And I might go in and just help them with one of the questions. And so when I'm asking for feedback, and I've helped this particular student with question number 2, I'll get that student to give me number 2. So you won't get you won't always get everybody sort of, you know, being able to answer all your questions. Simon says, do schools have a set curriculum? Quite often, yes, Simon, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that. They'll often give you a textbook, a curriculum, and that's really what the Director of Studies is there to help you with. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that, I think, next week. So we're having a look at grammar, and then I think I'm having a look at resources. So yes. Safia asks, do you get accommodation with your teaching posts? It depends, my darling. Sometimes schools will give you a couple of weeks of accommodation while you sort something out. Do you have plenty of time to travel around the country? Says Danny. Yes, I've never had a problem, Danny. I have seen an awful lot of lots of different countries, but just remember that, you know, you are there to do a job, so it might be that you've got the weekends or the holidays, so it's not like you're there all the time, but make the most of the city that you're in as well. So, you know, but yes, you've definitely got time to go and see things. Yes, I've had some great experiences. So I think that's all of the questions. Thank you so much, everybody, for all of those questions and for joining me again today. And I hope to see you next week. As I said, on Monday, we're going to be looking at how to teach grammar. as well as I think on Wednesday we're looking at sort of resources and where to get them. So Simon, hopefully that will answer your question a little bit more thoroughly, which I appreciate I've sort of glossed over a bit too quickly. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks there, Anna. I look forward to seeing you on Monday to cover the grammar lesson. That was a great time for us all. Right, well, thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a super day. Bye-bye for now.